Alrighty.
Packer?
Say again.
Eric?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that?
What chapter?
Oh, Perik. Oh, Perik, you said. Sorry about that. I think we're in Chof Ches, no? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're in Chof Ches. Let me just make sure that we are in Chof Ches indeed. Yeah, Chof Ches. Chof Ches, which should be somewhere around here. Chof Ches, here we go. Okay, so prior to this, we have been speaking about the inyan of the essentially the tziyur in the oirois, the esesris agnuzois. There's two shittas in the esesris agnuzois. One shitta in the esesris agnuzois that it has to do with koach hagvul of the kalim, and the other shita, and this is the shita which the Rebbe Rashab is holding on to over here, is the shita that the esesris agnuzois are hagbola of the oir. What oir? This is the or ein sof before the tzimtzum. In other words, the or hashayach lo'elamis. There's three madregas in the or hashayach lo'elamis. Though I haven't forgotten your question about the madregas in the or ein sof before lo'elamis, before the tzimtzum. I just partially haven't had time to get around to it. I've been like really quite busy, so I will get to it later. In any event, we were talking about the oirois, the three madregas of or. The or hashayach lo'elamis is the madrega that we're talking about, the lowest madrega of or, in which the tzimtzum occurs, and this is the madrega in which the esesphirois are found before the tzimtzum. In other words, not that the esesphirois agnuzois are created by the tzimtzum; they're simply revealed by the tzimtzum. What was there behelim before the tzimtzum is afterwards revealed. And how is it revealed? It is revealed first of all individually as one sphere at a time, but he explains, and he's going to explain it again now shortly, that there's actually two inyonim in the tzimtzum. There are two, or rather two madregas of tzimtzum. The first madrega of tzimtzum is the tzimtzum harishon, which is the siluk haor habli gvul. In other words, essentially the siluk haor, which is not going to be able to come into gvul, that's nistalik, and it becomes the igol agadol, as we explained, which surrounds the halal. That's the first tzimtzum, the tzimtzum derech siluk. And then there's another tzimtzum, a tzimtzum in the shoresh or oirois, and that's a tzimtzum not b'derech siluk, but b'derech miut. In other words, the first tzimtzum is a removal of the or, because the or that remains is a mahus. It's a different mahus. Masha'en kain, the second tzimtzum is simply a matter of degree. It's a tzimtzum b'kamus, not b'eichus. That's the lotion that's often used. A tzimtzum b'kamus rather than b'eichus. And he's now going to speak about this inyan somewhat at length. So, Perek Chof Ches, v'hine ha'tzimtzum. והנה הצמצום שהיה באור אין סוף, הוא שנסעלם האור שבבחינת אין סוף. This is the first tzimtzum, the tzimtzum harishon, the tzimtzum derech siluk. V'nishar rak b'chinas hashora hanal. And all that's left is the hashora. What is the hashora? This is not the hashora of the kalim, which is the inyan of the reshimo. This is the hashora of the oirois, which is the esesfrius agnuzois, is the tziyur, or the hashora of the oirois. What does hashora mean? Hashora really means from the lashon shiur, to give a shiur to something. But essentially, it's the idea of differentiating one or from another. But that differentiation is not begilui until after the tzimtzum. And therefore, when it says that the or was nistalik, the or shebuchinas ein sof was nistalik, what remained was the hashora. In other words, the tzimtzum, that the tzir ha'or that was behelem while the or ein sof was there. Now that it's removed, that comes out begilui. So he's going to explain this. The hainu hiskalus ha'eses v'izak nuzois shebus shezeu b'chinas hayoz ha'chreinish b'or ein sof. The final madrega, the lowest madrega in the Or Ein Sof is the Eses Spheres Hagnuzois, but they're in a state of Iskalulus. In other words, there's no differentiation in the Eses Spheres Hagnuzois until the Tzimtzum. You can't discern the differentiation in the Oiros. Why? Because it's all Or Echad, it's all Or Hashayach Lo'ilemis. There's no, Alpha that theoretically there are Eses Spheres, but you can't distinguish one sphere from another. So practically speaking, there's no differentiation. Only when the Or Ein Sof is Nistalek is a differentiation revealed. So that's what he's going to explain. So this Indian of the Eses Spheres Agnuza is to Malchus, the Ein Sof, as it's often called. He's going to call it that now shortly. That is called a Nakuda Lagabe, the Hispashtus of the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Or Ein Sof Ablikvu. The begins Malchus Sheba Ein Sof. Yeah, Malchus of Ein Sof. Omnam Hanakuda Harishoina Shehitchil is Galus Lachar Tzimtzum Hanuk is Harishona Sheba Eses Spheres. So there's the Nakuda as it is called Malchus da Ein Sof, and then after the Tzimtzum, the Nakuda that's Mizgale becomes Chochma of the Eses Spheres after the Tzimtzum. Again, Omnam Nakuda Harishonish Hitchili is Galus Lachar Tzimtzum Han Bechinas Harishonish Be'eses Spheres He Bechinas HaChochma Chulu. Now you could ask the question, L'choira, you could say, well, isn't the first Madrega to be Mizgale the Bechina of Keser? So what would you answer to that? You can switch on your mic. I think you can answer if anyone has an answer.
Keser shebechachma, chachma shebekesef.
That's an interesting svara, but the reason that what we say keser not so we say chochma not keser is because chochma is reishis hagilui, reishis chochma. Yiras Hashem, reishis chochma is the reishis. In other words, keser is still a bechina of klalius. It's a bechina of makif, and therefore we can't call it a reishis. So when we say that there's a rishona, a bechina rishona, and eses spherois, it has to be reishis chochma dafka. Yeah, reishis chochma. Now you might be right that the reishis of the reishis of chochma, that's mizgale, is a really keser shebechokma. But nevertheless, it's chochma. That's the ikavort over here. It's chochma. Okay, so now when this chochma is mizgale after the tzimtzum, this is already a second tzimtzum. The first tzimtzum is mesalek the Or Ein Sof. This second tzimtzum is metzamtzem the or into chochma. As he says now, v'zeu tzimtzum habeis liyos chochma b'chinas spherois pratios b'fnei atzmam. That the spheres become individualized spherois and can be distinguished one from the other because of the second tzimtzum. It's a tzimtzum derech miut. When the kuda zo yesh ba shnei tzimtzumim. So therefore, this whole inyan of Malchus da Ein Sof, there's two tzimtzumim in Malchus da Ein Sof. As Malchus of Ein Sof is Malchus of Ein Sof, in other words, before the first tzimtzum. So the tzimtzum there is to remove the inyanim of Ein Sof, so it only becomes the inyan of Malchus, and it's not Malchus da Ein Sof. In other words, to masalek the oir, which is bebechinas bligvul, and leave over something that's reishis hagilu. But that reishis hagilu itself requires a second tzimtzum, and that second tzimtzum is to distinguish one sphere from the other. This is what he's going to explain. Again, when kuda zo yesh bo shnei tzimtzumim, tzimtzum harishon, hu she'or Ein Sof baruch hu tzimtzem kol orisav, ve'he etzirat mipchinas hatachtoina sheba'or. All that came out was the tachtoina sheba'or. That was all that was left. Ve'hi b'chinas hashara anal. That's the hashara that was already in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, but now it's mizgale by way of the tzimtzum. And that's why it says kulam b'chochma dafka asisa, that the whole inyan begins really from chochma. Kigam chochma hi b'chinas asiya etzloi. Chochma is also a madrega v'asiya, as afal pi that chochma is a reishis and chochma is a gewaltika high madrega. Nevertheless, legabe hakadosh baruch hu b'chinas chochma is b'chinas asiya. So b'chinas asiya etzlo yizborach habilti bal gvul. He is bilti bal gvul betachlis. Masha'en ken chochma Bichitzoniuso at least, is the Inyan of Tachlis, and it's the Inyan of a beginning. Anything that has a beginning has an end, and therefore, well, actually, that's not really true because Oren Sof has a beginning that doesn't have an end. But in any event, the Indian of Chochma is that it has a gvul and a tachlis. The Hainu shegam legabe or v'haziv he
You
bechinas
said, you say, Arein Kates, Arein Tachlis. No?
Arein case or Arein tachlis be spashtusoi. But nevertheless, even the Oren Sof has a haschola. There's only what it's not a haschola b'zman, it's a haschola be'inyan. If you want to have a look in Mishnas Chabad, you'll see over there. There's an Inyan in there's the Inyan of Koyacha Gilui, or Yecholta Laha'ir B'Midu Ugvul, and the Yecholta Laha'ir B'Bechinas Ein Sof. There's another Bechinas in Yecholas, but even Yecholas is not Atzmus. It's Yecholas Ha'atzmus, but it's not Atzmus Mamish. And there, I explained. There's a brief. I think it was from the Tzemach Tzedek, if I'm not mistaken, and the Rebbe Maharash as well, I believe, that there's an Inyan of tzimtzum even before the tzimtzum Arishon. There's an Inyan of tzimtzum. It's not mamash tzimtzum, but it's an Inyan of tzimtzum.
That's the Mashire you mentioned.
That Mashire is already that's already a lower Inyan than that. The Inyan of Yecholta Laha'ir, in order for the Yecholta Laha'ir to become Laha'ir, Bebechinas Orein Sof, that's already epis and Inyan of who magbil is atzmoy be'ezeshu oifen. Even though it's not, you can't really say that it's a tzimtzum. The Arizal does not say it's a tzimtzum. The tzimtzum Arishon is dafka Arishon. But if you want, if you have a Mishnas Chabad, you can have a look over there in the Yecholos and explains the that Inyan in the chapter on Yecholos. If you don't have the safe, I can send you one. Just email me your address and I'll send you one. In any event, let's continue. Okay, the Hainu shegam legabe or v'haziv b'chinas asiya. Chochma is b'chinas asiya. Kulam b'chochma asisa b'chinas asiya. Chochma can be regarded as asiya already because it's the beginning of something and it's already not atzmus. Only what? There's a ha'or of atzmus in Chochma, as I'll explain shortly. Lefisha ne'etzla, Chochma was ne'etzla b'chinas hayoseh tachtoina shnikra asiya. That Chochma was ne'etzal from Malchus to Ein Sof. And Malchus is called Asiya, Al Derech Moshe. It's called Asiya Al Derech Moshe because you can't really call it Asiya in the same sense that you can call Olam Asiya Asiya. It's a different thing. But here is Malchus Ein Sof Kanal, as we said. So that was the first tzimtzum. The first tzimtzum is that to leave Malchus as an akuda, that all the oil is mistalik and leaves Malchus as an akuda. Then there's another tzimtzum. And tzimtzum Beis, who should buy as a spheres agnuzois, are called kasher b'chinesis achtus. All the spheroids are within Malchus, but b'chinesis achtus. Yeah, because all the spheroids are in Malchus. Malchus contains everything, contains all the spheroids. But b'chinesis achtus, without being distinguishable. V'im kain, hara b'chinesis chochma, has a klula gam im shara spheroids. Chochma was together with all the other spheroids. It was one... uniform cholent, I suppose you could call it. Yeah, right. That's what it was. Before things came to be distinguished to one thing from the other. Everything was all on a very high madrega, and therefore it was indistinguishable from anything else. It was klula, chochma was klula in kol ha-sfiros b'yachad until the second tzimtzum. The hainu lo b'chinas b'tzius nikeres. It wasn't that when we say that Chochma was Bechinas Chochma, it wasn't Chochma in a way that's Nikeris. It was Chochma Bechinas built in Nikeris. Right? We couldn't distinguish it yet until the second Tzimtzum. The first Tzimtzum distinguished everything as an Akuda. All the ore left an Akuda. All the ore was removed and left an Akuda. And in that Akuda you have 10 Bechinois, but those Bechinois are Bechinas built in Nikeris, not recognizable until the second tzimtzum. Why was the each sphere not distinguishable even yet, even though there was already a tzimtzum? Because since there were 10 spheres together and they were mamshich ha'or ha'oila al kulana, In other words, when you have 10 things together and it makes a complete inyan, then there's an or that's nimshach, that's a higher or than each of the individual oiros, and therefore they're still they're still not individualized, or they're still invisible as individual entities, so to speak.
Is that or the Kesser?
Yes, that would be an or of Kesser. Yes, yes. And he carries on. Ukamo al derech or haseichel, al derech moshel or haseichel, hamalubash bahateva. In the word baruch, for instance, as explained, who in gilu hakavona ha'elyonin shebe'eses firois chulu. So, in other words, that inyan that's melubash, the kavona that's melubash in the word baruch, is like kavona elyoina for all the eses firois. In other words, all the eses firois have their kavona, what they are there for, and they're called essentially Raza Dishmei. We'll get to that in later on. Raza Dishmei, the secret of the Shemois, or Shmei Hamiyuchad boy, the secret of Shem Havaya, and so all of those spheroids then are malubashed, are amalgamated as one thing. They're one inyan, because what do they reveal? Hakavona El Yoina. They don't reveal themselves as individual spheroids. They reveal themselves as Hakavona El Yoina be'atzilus haspheroids. Right, so it's a higher madrega. What's a kavona elyon? Again, as Adam said, it's in and of the rots and the keser of the spheroids that that still hasn't allowed there to be distinguishing between the various spheroids. Okay, he's going to explain now how it happens. The second tzimtzum, he'll explain that shortly. So when he separated out chokhmah from the other spheroids, just like you separated out one letter from the word baruch, the base of baruch, he separated out chokhmah from the other spheroids. Netzla spheros of chokhmah lavada. That was the second tzimtzum. Tzimtzum aleph, the first tzimtzum, hu bechinas siluk v'is almas haor. That was, as we said before, the inyan of the or Ein Sof. That was nistalik. Masha'enken, the tzimtzum Beis is an or of division. It's not an or of siluk. It's an or of, you could say, it's like a flashlight which highlights one inyan at a time, so to speak. Right? It's a much more focused, so to speak. But tzimtzum Beis, in fact. If I'm not mistaken, it was Rabbi Ginsburg, Yitzhak Ginsburg, that used to call this second tzimtzum the tzimtzum b'derech rikuz. Right? Rikuz means to concentrate the or into one inyan. I don't know if it was his chidush or if he picked it up from somewhere else, but this second tzimtzum is called the tzimtzum derech rikuz. In other words, it focuses the or on one thing, and therefore it's a mute lagabi the rest of the or. Yeah? Okay, but tzimtzum habeis hu b'chinas mute levad. It's not a siluk, it's a mute. Okay. Lefize move on. Now we can understand why the kav is called Gilu Helem. Because the inyan of the kav we would think might be Yesh Ayin. But in fact, it's not Yesh Ayin, it's Gilu Helem. He's going to explain why. Dagam Sham Shochu al Adeha Tzimtzum. Even though the kav is only nimshach because of the tzimtzum, this tzimtzum that brings about the kav is not the inyan of siluk, it's the inyan of mute, it's the inyan of rikuz. It's marak as an or in a certain direction, a certain kav, a certain very narrow line. You could say it's like a laser beam, I suppose. They come out as individual spheroids. That's the tzimtzum. The nature of chokhmah, the mahus of chokhmah, is still the same chokhmah all the way through. Chokhmah is chokhmah, whether it's chokhmah of chokhmah before the tzimtzum, whether it's chokhmah of atzilus, whether it's chokhmah bria, it's all the nature of chokhmah. So again, והחוכמה בעצם הרו בחינס חוכמה שבאין סוף. Even Chokhmah after the tzimtzum is Chokhmah. It has the nature of Chokhmah Sheba Sof, and he's going to explain what that means. V'yesh ba mehaor harishon. In Chokhmah itself is the or harishon. Kumuvan mehamoshel the prate hasichlim shinzbar le'el per chofay. I don't remember what he explained over there, but even these prate hasichlim, they carry the same inyan across from madrega to madrega. In other words, Chokhmah still carries the same inyan of koach ma, from the highest madrega to the lowest madrega of chokhmah. In other words, from chokhmah of the chokhmah in Oren Sof before the tzimtzum, to all the way through to chokhmah of Asiyah. It's all the same concept in chokhmah. Again, yesh b'hama'amer rishon k'muvan me'amoshel the prate hasichlim shizbar le'el perek chofay rak shehi b'chliz miut ha'or. Only what when it comes out as chokhmah da'ak or chokhmah v'atzilus is b'chliz miut. It's only therefore Gilu Helen because it's not a new Metzius marriage. It's the same Metzius that was there before. Only before it wasn't Begilu, now it's Begilu because of the second tzimtzum. So Lagabe.
Could you sorry.
Yeah.
Could you say the siluk was to make chachma, and then chachma is what creates is a miyat. That's the sirus come from is then.
Yeah, and he's going to actually he's going to say that he's going to say that this inyan of chokhmah has two qualities. One quality of chokhmah is that it's the reishis hagiloi, and therefore it's the reishis hagiloi of what was there before. Therefore, it's only giloi hahelem. It's not yesh mi'ayin. But lagabe the Oren Sof habli gvul before the tzimtzum, it's regarded as yesh mi'ayin, even though v'hachokhmah ma'ayin temotzeh. Right? So Chokhmah has these two qualities. One aspect of Chokhmah is Ma'ayin Timotzai, that's actually Pnimius HaChokhmah. And then Chokhmah as the rashis of the rest of the Giloi, is only B'chinas Giloi Hela. There's two inyonim in Chokhmah, Pnimius HaChokhmah and Chitzonis HaChokhmah. The Pnimius HaChokhmah Yesh Mi'ayin, Chitzonis HaChokhmah Giloi Hela. Okay, so that's exactly what he's going to explain now. Im Kain Hazeh B'chinas Giloi Hela Lavad, or Lagabe Orein Sofa Bligvul, והוא האור האוהל על כולנו, החוכמה וכן כל הספירוס, היא בעין ארוך, שהרי נקרא שורש המקור הגבול לגבי מדרגה זו, כמו שדבר לאל, פרק ט"ו, and that's what would be called the inyan of yesh mi'ayin. He's going to explain this in somewhat more depth. וגם שהצמצום היה בבחינת סילוק האור, the first tzimtzum was סילוק האור, שנשאר רק רוישם לבלבד. All that was left after the tzimtzum was a roishim of the original Oren Sof. What does this mean? There was only a roishim left. Oren Sof a bli gvul, shezehu ha'or ha'oila al kulana, and therefore did not allow, because of the or ha'oila al kulana, did not allow individual madregas to be revealed. They all were revealed as one thing because all that was revealed was the or ha'oila al kulana. So again, returning to Oren Sof a bli gvul, shezehu ha'or ha'oila al kulana al shosha ha'oiras kanal. Right, this is the shorish of all the oiros, and the or ha'olah al kulan is above them. Hinagam shenistalek ha'or al the tzimtzum, nishar roishim emena b'shosh ha'oiros. There's a roishim of that original, all the Orein Sof, even though it was nistalek, but there's a roishim left in the oiros. There's a roishim left in the oiros, and that is particularly in Sfiras HaChokhmah, which is why Chokhmah is the Reishis HaGiloi, and he's going to explain. Anything in Kedusha is never completely uprooted, even by the tzimtzum HaRishon. In other words, there's a Roishem, there's a Roishem of that or. Now, we're not talking about the Rishimo. Right? The Rishimo is a whole different ball game. We're talking about a Roishem of the Orein Sof that's left in Chokhmah. And why is that? Because we have a principle. The principle is Davash of Kedusha Enene Kamim Koimel Lagamri. And that's why the Koisel HaMa'aravi, the Shechina Lo Zaza Koisel HaMa'aravi of the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because we have this principle. Davash of Kedusha Enene Kamim Koimel Lagamri. It always leaves Episaroishim, and therefore there has to be a place in the Beis HaMikdash that is still has a Madrega of Kedusha, of the original Kedusha. That's the Koisel HaMa'aravi. And similarly with, we'll see shortly, similarly with Chochma, Afal that the origin was Nistalik, it left a Roshim in Chochma, in Primus Chochma. That's what he's going to explain. About who Bechinas Roshim Bilvad. It's only a Roshim, it's not the Metzius of the Orein Sof that was before the tzimtzum, that was removed by the tzimtzum, but it's a Roshim of that Inyan. Now, when you have a Roshim of something that's Orein Sof, what exactly does that mean? How is it a Roshim? Since that Inyan itself is Orein Sof, a Roshim of Orein Sof is also Orein Sof. So how does that work? He's going to explain. That's the Inyan of Primus HaChochma, and that is the Inyan of Koyach Ma, the bittul of the oil to the Ma'or. And that's why it remains a Roshim of the Ma'or. It remains meyuchad and davuk in one sense or another to the Ma'or. He's going to explain this in greater depth. V'yesh loymar she'aroshim hanishar zehu b'chinas orein sof sheshore b'chochma. That's the orein sof in the primis of chochma. Because what does it say about orein sof in Perek Lamed Hay in Tanya? It says, he's going to quote it shortly, that the Inyan of orein sof hu levado hu ve'ein zulosai v'zohi madregas hachochma. And that's what he says in the Hagoah in Perek Lamed Hay. Hu levado hu ve'en zulase v'zohi madregas hachochma. It's the pinmius hachochma. That's the Inyan. That's the roishim that's left in chochma. That hu levado hu ve'en zulase. וכמו שכתוב בספר של בינין, פרק ל"ה בהגוה, שהחוכמה נקראת אמס, משום שבו יש שורי אור אין סוף, עד מכנס הרושים, the אור אין סוף הבלי גבול. And he's going to explain that on later on, and much later in the Sefer, Perik, whatever, like Tavkuf something or other, whatever, yeah? If you have your Sefer in front of you, you could see. Why Masha Kasu look at the Torah, the Ramas, Vayika Kaira, Perik Beis, the Chochma Mislabisha, or Hasoive, Bechinis Pnimi. In other words, Afal Pi that it's Ora Soivev and it should not be Melubash. Nevertheless, that's the Koyach of Chochma that it's that the Pnimis HaChochma is able to contain, so to speak, Or HaSoivev bebechinas Pnimius. Who in an emotional should be medrash mimaras gedolis to maras katanois. What does the medrash say over there? The medrash says like this: basically, if you have let's say a large body of water, right, and something is reflected in the water. Let's say your face is reflected in the water, so you can see your face on a larger scale. Depending on how far away you're standing from the water, or whatever, but you see it on a larger scale. Take a single drop of water, and your face is still reflected in a single drop of water. It's the same face that's reflected, but it's much, 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 much smaller. Right? It has to do with the roundness of the drop. I forget what it's called. The convex, whatever, something or other. The mathematicians should know what this is. But in any event, you could see your reflection. You could see your whole face in a drop of water, just as you could see it in like a big pool of water, right? That's the Indian. That's the moshel that in the Medrash. Maros gdolos, maros ktanos. Large mirrors and small mirrors. A small mirror reflects the face just as a large mirror does. Okay, only what? It's on a much smaller scale. So in Chochma, you only have a roishim of Orein Sof. It's not the Orein Sof mamish, but a roishim of the Orein Sof. Abli gvul. Shari mikol makom has a min haknaf, v'lo knaf mamish. We're talking about the Indian of tzitzis, Parshas Koirach. We're talking about the Indian of tzitzis, and the knaf has to be min haknaf. In other words, that the tzitzis have to be the same min as the beged l'chatchila. In other words, the beged should be wool and the tzitzis should be wool, min haknaf. But it's not actually the knaf. It's min haknaf, same min, same species as the knaf.
How did the big mirrors and little mirrors mushel for soviv?
I think all that he's saying is he's not explaining it so much as the moshel for soive, but he's explaining how an inyan of soive can be reflected in a davar mugbal like a single drop. Okay. Right? In other words, it still reflects your whole face, even though it's on a much smaller scale. Nevertheless, it reflects your face, and that's what he's talking about. How something that's l'choira ein sof can be nevertheless reflected in a single drop, i.e., how the Orein Sof can be reflected in Chochma. Afal that Chochma is Yesh Mi'ayin. Afal that Chochma is Yesh Mi'ayin. Nevertheless, the chokhmah prior to the tzimtzum is reflected in the chokhmah after the tzimtzum. I think that's where he's going with this. Yeah? Yeah, go look through it again. See, I think that's what he means. In any event, so it's mina knaf lo knaf mamish rak yoyzer rosh hama'amer ha'in sof. But since the pnimis of chokhmah is a rosh hama'amer ein sof a bligvul, has a gam ken between the riba or between the bligvul. The pnimis of chokhmah is also between the bligvul. And we're not talking here about the Rishimo. This Roshim is not the Rishimo. There's two different things. The Rishimo is the Shurish HaKelim. Al-Kopanim, according to the way he's explaining it over here, that's the Indian Rishimo. It's the Koyach HaGvul. Masha'enkain here, over here, the Hagbola of the Or is not the Koyach HaGvul. It's a Koyach HaGilui. Okay, just you have to get that straight. It's a very important distinction. Again, ואין זה כעניין הרשימו שהוא ראש מהאין סוף הפליגבול, זה מבוא במקום אחר, שזהו ראש מהאור שנשאר בה האויסיוס. Right, it's the rosh of the or that's in the oisius that are actually the oisius of Rishimo. And that's a whole different thing. That's a koach hagvul. The sham the yosef shezeh b'chinas koach hagvul sheba ein sof, being that the Rishimo is a koach hagvul. Al kain rosh ma'or hu b'chinas helem ba'oisius. It's in the state of helem over there. V'gam b'chinas koach gvuli, and it also comes into gvul. The or itself comes into gvul because of the kalim, the union of kalim. Okay, where is this written about specifically? In the Maamer Yonasi Tafresh Mem from the Rebbe Maharash, where he's the one that explained the union of the Rishimo more than anybody else to start off with. And there's a Maamer from the Alter Rebbe as well, but the Rebbe Rashab explains it much more detail. The Rebbe Maharash rather explains it much more detail. Yonasi Vehemshech Yonasi Tafresh Mem. Right, so the union of the koyach of the union of the koyach hagvul. Well, no, I'm sorry, not the koyach hagvul. The union of the hagbolas haor of the or ein sof before the tzimtzum. That union is called koyach hagiloi and not koyach hahelem. It's not koyach hagvul per se. It's the union of koyach hagiloi, and since it's koyach hagiloi, it has the koyach to be misgale b'bechinas pnimius as well, and not just b'bechinas makif. Okay. לפי זה יש לבר גם לשיטה זו מה שכתוב במקום אחר בעניין הקו. We can now explain what we mean as far as the kav is concerned. שיש בו שני הופכים. There's two opposite inyonim in the kav. On the one hand, the kav is the kav amida, moideid medidois. On the other hand, the kav is miyached yichudim. Right, this is there's a section in Shara Yichud in the Mittler Rebbe, one of the early prokim in Shara Yichud, maybe Perik Dalet Hay around there, where he explains this inyan, these two inyonim in the kav, that afal that the kav is b'derech klal known as the kav hamida, but nevertheless the ikar function of the kav is not only to be moeded medidois, another ikar function of the kav is to be miyached yichudim. It's miyached all the other spheroids together into yichudim, as I'll explain. Again, so yesh bo shnei hofchim shu kav hamida v'gam mekash miyached oisei iskalus ba'spheroids. It brings about tiskalus as well. So two opposite things. On the one hand, it's moeded. On the other hand, it brings about tiskalus. לפי מה שכתוב במקום האחר, שהקו שורש מאור אין סוף הבלי גבול, רק שנמדד על ידי הרשימו. This is according to the other shita, that the kav, the hagbola in the kav is because of the rishimo, and not because of the hagbola of the or itself, but because of the hagbola of the kalim, the rishimo. That's the other shita. That's not the shita that he's dealing with in Ayin Beis. That shita actually explains in Samavav and various other places, but yeah, he's dealing with the shita that the esesrius agnuzos v'chulu of the hagbolas ha'or before the whole inner rishimo, without the inner rishimo. Again, לפי מה שכתוב במקום אחר, שהקו שורשוי מאור אין סוף הבלי גבול, רק שנמדד על ידי רשימו, הרי זה מובן בפשיטוס, it's obvious, self-understood, the ma'acher שבעצם הוא בלי גבול, since the or itself is בלי גבול, על כן הוא מקשר מייחד, ומייחד, והמדידה הוא מצד הרשימו חולה, and the medida comes from the rishimo, but the meyachid yichudim comes from the kav. But that's all according to that shita, not our shita. Ach lefi hamuvan kan, our shita, the shita that we've been explaining with the Esses trees like Nuzos, or the Medidas Haor, Dimi Yosh Yagamber Shorsho Yesh Esses Firois, there's Esses Firois, the Shorish of the Kav, which are the Esses Firois like Nuzos. Timushum Zehu Bechinas Kav HaMoedaid, that's what's called Kav HaMoedaid, because it has this inyan of Esses Firois, which are Moedaid the Or. And what in what way are they moided the or? But often ha'oiros gluyim be'esus firos chulu. It's moided the or of the esus firos as they come into gilui, into the gilui spheres. In other words, the spheres of Atzilus and Bria and so on and so forth. Vafilu yeshloima the spheres are the spheres of Ak as well. In any event, mikol makom haru makasher miyachet. Even though it's moided the medidus the oiros. Nevertheless, it's also Makashim Yachek called as Spherois under the Haroshim Shaboy, because of the Roshim of the Or Sof that there is in the Spherois, and particularly in the sphere of Chokhmah. So Makashim Yachek called as Spherois under the Haroshim Shaboy, Or Sof Ablikvu. Ha'ela al Kulam. The Kamaroshim Vukin is Ein Sof. Even the Roshim is Ein Sof, as we explained before. Mikoma Komar has a Roshim Levad, and nevertheless, it's not the Iker Or itself, it's only a Roshim of the Or. So the kav legabe, what's down below is a madriga just a mute or, and anything that comes out is giloy helem. But the kav itself legabe shorshum and koiroi, right? Legabe shorshum and koiroi, that's in the of beginners giloy helem, as it explained. Now the kav legabe shorshum and koiroi, who beginners giloy helem. Okay. So that basically is the inyonim of the Eses Firis HaGnuzois, and now he's going to just tie this into the inyan of Parshas Chukas and the questions that we raised at the beginning. Now, I'm not sure if you're yeah, carry on.
What would be the difference in the Kava Etzem and the Rishimo at their source? I mean, they're both a point, so to speak.
Yeah, all right. The difference is that the Rishimo, according to the Shita, the Rishimo is Koach HaHelem, and the Kav is Koach HaGilui. They come from really two different places in Yechoilis, right? There are several different madrigas in Yechoilis. One is Yechota Laha'ir Babilti Bal Gvul, Bebechinas Ein Sof. That's one Inyan in the Yechoilis. Yechota Laha'ir Bamido Gvul, right? That's the Inyan of, that is essentially the Inyan of the Kav. Laha'ir Bamido Gvul. Then there's the Inyan of Laha'ir, Lo Laha'ir Klal. That's the Inyan of the tzimtzum, the shorish of the tzimtzum, right? And that the Rishimo is part of the Inyan of Lo Laha'ir Klal. And that's why the Rishimo is Magbil La'oiro, is according to that whole way of understanding things. If you have a look again and say in the Perikon Yechoilis, you'll see these things sort of spelled out. Okay, so now I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but when the Rebbe Rashab wrote the Ayin Beis, there's other hemsheichim that basically the same thing as well. The beginning and ends of the prokim to do with the parsha was only added afterwards. So in other words, he didn't say it like that, or he didn't write it like that. He actually wrote these maamorim. He didn't write the maamorim that way with a beginning and an end. The beginnings and ends were added later on, and therefore they have alpha that they bring the Indian as spoke about in the Pnim of the Maamer. It's it does seem at sometimes like sort of like an afterthought, if you know what I mean. It's brought in as a just to make a chai to that week's parsha. But nevertheless, let's see how he says it. First of all, it says one of the questions that he asked, why does it say Hashem? Why twice Hashem? Right? And what's the whole meaning of Chukas HaTorah? And so on and so forth. There were several other questions that he asked, but he's going to answer them now. The Adam Arishon was placed in Gan Eden L'Avdil L'Shamra, Amrazal la'avda zormach mitzvahs aseh l'shamra shasal los aseh. Mish Rabbi Isa shekar avodas hakabonis. That this Inyan of la'avda l'shamra refers to the kabonis, not to the mitzvahs ma'asiyas and the mitzvahs aseh and the mitzvahs los aseh, but rather to the avodas hakabonis. That's what it says in Midrash. In other words, v'hainu sh'al yedei zeh mamshichim tosefus oires began Eden. That's how to be mamshich, whether you're talking about mitzvah the mitzvahs or you're talking about the mitzvah the kabbonis, all their inyan is to mamshich tosefus oires in Gan Eden. The inyan began Eden vayita hava Elokim, and it uses both names, Havaya and Elokim, vayita Havaya Elokim. Now, all throughout creation, it's only by Yom Elokim you hear or by Yom Elokim tachar is desh b'chulu b'chulu, like all those by Yom Elokims. But when it comes to the Gan Eden, it's Vayita Havaya Elokim. Shem Molei, both of the names. Shebegan Eden, Meir Gilu Shem Havaya. In Gan Eden, you have this, the name of Havaya Begilu. Therefore, it's Taka Gan Eden. Shezeu Yisra on Gan Eden, Halo Oilemis, Shem Elokim. All the rest of the Brias, B'Shem Elokim, Hashem in Gan Eden, Havaya Elokim. So Shem Elokim, B'chinas Helem. וגן עדן מאיר שם הוויה בחינס הגילוי חולו. והוא עניין ביוד נברא העולם הבא. So the Indian of Olam Haba is the Indian of Gan Eden. That's Olam Haba is Gan Eden, at least according to this particular thing over here. I know in Chabad sources it brought that Olam Haba could also mean the time of Tchias HaMeisim, but it's not dealing with that issue of Tchias HaMeisim, and therefore it's possible to take a Pshuto Olam Haba is Gan Eden. And that's what he means over here. Inyan beyud nivra olam haba, bechinas hachochma chulu, b'shezeu gilu hatanuk shebegan Eden. That's the Inyan. The yud is bechinas chochma. As we know, the shem yud kei vav kei. The yud is chochma, hey bina vav zo, and the final hey malchus. So the yud is bechinas chochma, and that's the gilu hatanuk in Gan Eden. That's what it's all about. But yud nivra olam haba, the gilu of tanuk in Gan Eden. That he planted a tree over there. Vayita Hashem Elokim gan be'edem mikedem shnikra b'shem netia. It's called planting it. In other words, it's sort of ki'ilu a new thing, a new planting. It's not a hemshech of what was before the Tanug of Chochma, the Tanug of Gan Eden, which is Gan Eden is essentially the gilui of Tainug in Chochma in a lower Madrega, in the Madrega of Malchus, essentially. That's what it is. So, in a Roch, a Tainug of Gan Eden, Lagaba Tainug of Chochma. Tainug Chochma is much greater. You put a seed in the ground, it's not the same as the pre from which the seed came. That's primarily the Indian of the Inyan of Karbonas, that's the Biru Nefesh Bahamas, the Adam ki Yakriv, Mikem Korban Lavaya, as the Alter Rebbe says in first in Vayikra in Likutei Torah. I think it's the first Maamer. Adam ki Yakriv Mikem Korban Lavaya. In other words, that we have to bring ourselves as the Korban, and when we do that, that's a Biru. It's a Biru the Nefesh Bahamas. Yakriv Mikem. Therefore, mamshichim tosefes oires began Eden. That's mamshich, additional oil in Gan Eden when the nefesh Bahamas is rectified and purified. Additional oils in Gan Eden. In other words, a higher madrega of chochma is nimshach. Mamshichim tosefes oires began Eden mibichnes chochma, a higher madrega in chochma. Began bichnes orin sob shalamani mea chochma. That also can be nimshach. V'hainu b'chinas hakesed ramach mitzvos aseh v'shasal los aseh. That can also be nimshach on the day that we mamshich tosefes oiris. In other words, because of being makriv, the nefesh of Bahamas, etc. So shasal los aseh v'zan mitzvos rabbanon hein tarach amude or so altogether. Shasal los asay, Ramach mitzvos asay, and Sheva mitzvos the Rabbanon. That makes Tarach Hamuday or 620 mitzvos altogether. The 620 pillars of Keser. Keser Gematria 620. Ve'shloim hazeh v'chinas or sof hasher b'chochma. As we said before, the Orient of Hasher b'chochma is in the Pnimis of Chochma, which is called Hu Levadu Hu Ve'en Zu L'asoi. Shnizbar Le'el Shezehu Haroishem Orient of a Bli Gvul. That's the Orient of a Bli Gvul in the Gvul of Chochma, so to speak, in the Kli of Chochma. While Yos B'Gan Eden, Shu B'chinas Mamaliko, Olmin Gilu B'chinas Or HaSoivev, Hasher b'chochma. So it's Or HaSoivev that is nevertheless Shor in Chochma, in the Pnimis of Chochma. Okay, so what does that have to do with the Inyan of Pashas Chukas? Pashas Chukas is in the Paraduma. Achine Paraduma Maaseh B'chutz Dafka. The whole Inyan of Paraduma has to be done outside of the kloim of the Mishkan. Why Dafka outside? Because it's to purify the Inyan of contact with the dead, as he's going to explain further. The Hineksiv V'nar Yoitze Mi'aden L'harshkos is Aganu Misham Yiporet. So in other words, as soon as it's Yoitze Mi'aden, it's in the Madrega, in the world of Pirud. It's Misham Yiparid. It's in the world of Pirud. And it becomes four heads. The four heads of water are Nilus, Pishun, Gichoin, Prat. The Ladal Roishim. In other words, the river divides up into four inyonim. The river, obviously, as I think we've explained once before, is the Inyan of Bina, divides into four Roshim. Vahen Dalet Chais Abakava, which is the four, these four rivers correspond to the four Chais of the Makava. Okay, we don't have to go into it very much now, because he doesn't go into it anyway. And that becomes four different Malchiyos, which I think we explained earlier is the inyonim of Bavel. Sorry, the inyonim of the Lashonos va'aretz hasat toihu va'voyu v'choshech and alpnei hatahom. Right, those are four madrigas, and the first corresponds to these correspond to the Dalad Malchiyos. The first one corresponds to the Inyan of Bavel, the Inyan of Toihu, and the Vavoyu is Parosomadai. And then Choshech is Yavan, and Tahom is Rome. Anyway, in any event, it's B'Shtoshel Dan Zayin Nasa B'Di Gimel Malchuyo, Dalad Malchuyois, Shezeu Hatanu Shenafel B'Derech Shvilu Nefila. Right, the primus Inyan of Keser, etc., fell into the Malchuyois of Umas Oilam, which obviously is a tremendous nefila. The shvira and nefila. It paraduma. So that's why we need paraduma, because of the shvira and because of the nefila. We need the inyan paraduma. Zenyan paraduma shema aseh b'chutz. It's done outside the camp. Hainu inyan atshuva. What's the whole inyan of outside the camp? Someone who was outside the camp becomes inside the camp. It's the inyan of tshuva. Lahava is the yetzahora shenafal b'shvira chulu to metaken the yetzahora. The yetzahora is a product of the shvira. Were it not for the shvira, it would not be a yetzahora. I found you on the outside. There's a shira shirim, perches. I found you outside. The kaya bali tshuva, that when they were not connected to Torah mitzvahs, they were the mechina of outside, right? They were kind of lost. Bali tshuva. That's emtzoacha b'chutz. Sheva hazoyas doichach b'nei oil moed, and the reason that you have to do sheva hazoyas when in the carbonas of the sheva yimei miluyim and so on, the sheva hazoyas doichach b'nei oil moed, they sprinkle the blood in towards the oil moed 7 times, la'aloi pnimiusa, in order to raise up to a high madrega the inyan of it's actually the inyan of malchus. La'alois b'pnimiusa. That's talking about malchus. V'chakach seifus apara la'asosa efer. The para has to become ashes. Al derech moshel eis hanisraf nasa efer. When you burn the wood and all the water and everything else leaves, all you're left with is the afar. What's the afar? The efer, the ashes itself. Nasa efer, hare efer, husavat musabat siur ha'etz, who markovas agimel siyesoidos. The original form of the tree was comprised of those gimel yesoidos, mayim, ruach, afar. Then nisraf v'nishar rak etzem mahus, and all that's left after the tree has been burned is the etzem mahus. In other words, the etzem inyan of what the tree is all about, which is yesoid ha'afar. More kind of yetzahara, and similarly when it comes to yetzahara, who tziur hara. It's also the tziur hara. Who are rotem l'sechel midash shaloi shekol ze tarich sreifa u'shvira. We have to deal with the yetzahara in a way of shvira, because otherwise it's never get a tikkun. It has to first be broken apart, and then it can be put together in terms of tikkun. Excuse me. Shekol ze tarich sreifa u'shvira lagamre v'yenisha rak ha'efer hainu etzem koach hamishave hapashut, because all that's left is the actual metzius. There's no tzius to the metzius, and there's no chayes to the metzius. All there is metzius. K'moshehu bli shum tziur shezeu yachol yitzhapech lekedusha. That inyan can be turned into kedusha. That inyan of built metzius can be turned into kedusha. Lio is toikav haratzon leelokus, and a person can be aroused in tremendous ratzon to do what it is that the Eibishter wants of him. And one of the questions that we asked, why was the paraduma done by Elazar, not by Aharon, but it was done dafka with the Sagana Kohani? And he's going to explain. The Isav Yalkut Elazar Kel Oizer. The name Elazar is from the name Kel Oizer, right? Hashem helps. If someone comes to purify himself, then he's given aid. He's given help. He's never told, go and purify yourself or come and purify yourself, but as soon as he starts to do it of his own accord, then they help him. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean necessarily they're going to give him a hand actually and lead him to where he has to go, but he has Yad Dishmaya. Things start to work out. Things start to kind of fall into place. That's the Indian of Kel Oizer, which is Eliezer, right? Eliezer, who was, sorry, not Eliezer, Elazar, who was the Kohen for, he was actually the Sagan Kohen, but nevertheless became the Kohen afterwards, after the passing of Aharon. So he, in Aaron's lifetime, he was the one that did the paraduma. Hayabe Elazar dafka. This will be Yalkut Elazar Kael Oizer. That's the name. Elazar actually spells Kael and Oizer without the vav, obviously, but Kael Oizer. Ki haba l'tara Messiah loy. Someone comes to purify himself, is given a hand. Latzeis mituma l'tara, to remove the tuma and to move into tara. Tzchim ezav Siyum ilamayla shezev Kael Oizer. And Hashem gives us strength to be able to do that. He gives us possibility of being able to do that, even though humanly it might not have been possible. And part of the union of the paraduma was that it had to be Mayim Chaim El Keli. We had to have Mayim Chaim. What's the union of Mayim Chaim and also Mayim Chaim El Keli? Mayim B'chilas Chochma. Mayim Chaim B'chilas Makor HaChochma. So that's the inner Mayim Chaim. The way the Mayim is, Lamal and Esses Gnuzos, that sort of seeps through and filters through until it becomes Chochma, the Makor Hagilui. Right? So it's the original source, therefore, is in the Esses Gnuzos, Koimat Tzimtzum. Chochma Hivim Madrega Gavoya Ve'Elyoina Be'etzem V'gam Yesh Ba'Ha'or Shebiz Achdus Viz Karlutz Kulam. There's the Or Ha'ol Al Kulana that joins everything together and makes it indistinguishable as different spheroids. But anyway, that's the situation. Behind Or Ha'ol Al Kulana Kanal Per Chov Zayin. Omnam V'gam Yesh Loem Shal Yedezeh Mamshik B'Nuz Asus Or En Sof Bligvul. Also, when all the spheres are together, it's Mamshik the Indian of the Or En Sof Bligvul. Shalamalim Mishosh Ha'oiros, which transcends the short of each of those oiros individually. We have the oil al kulona. It's also an union of or habligvu. Shalomayla mishor sha'oyres and barshor shemekoyen rishon cholu. Zeu shenemar paraduma base pamim havaya. And that's why it says havaya by the union of the paraduma, because it says like this: by Adama Hashem zoisku kasater asher tziva Hashem. I could have simply said asher tzivani or asher tzivisi. right? Something like that. It says Beis Pamim Hashem. And why does it say Beis Pamim Hashem? Because we are going to speak about two madregas, Beis Pamim Havaya. Why? The Hina Shnei Shemos Havaya Yadua, the Echad who is inside the Ishtalshlus, that one of them is inside the Ishtalshlus, but Beishel Amanim is inside the Ishtalshlus. And one of them is higher than inside the Ishtalshlus. Obviously, the one that's inside the Ishtalshlus is the lower madrega. Into the Havai de la Sata, that's the Madrega within Hishtalshlus. It's mamshich the oiros the way they are before the tzimtzum. Kam yesh leimer the bechinas asus and sofa plikvul shoresh bechinas hasoy kol almin. That's so shoresh kol almin. I'm sorry, the shoresh of soy kol almin is also this or ha'atzmus and the atzmus or in sof before the tzimtzum. Which madrega would this be in terms of the three madregas that we spoke about? So l'chayro to be the Indian of or shebegilu la'atzmoi. Or shebegilu la'atzmoi is the shirish of the or hasoivev, and or hashayich lo'elemis is the Indian of the shirish of the or hama'amer kol almin. Then there's still the Indian of etzema or, and from what I remember, what he says later on in Ayin Beis is that will be misgale bisman hamashiach. That or etzema or. In any event, the Beis Shemois, Hein Shorsha Hashnei Madregs, the Mamalik or Amin V'Solvik Amin Havaya, Soivev, and Elokim Mamalik. זהו ידע השם אל מוישה היינו שני השם הוויה בהשתלשלוס. First of all, when it says וידע הוויה אל מוישה, Shem Havai Dishtalshlus, because it's dibur, it's able to be heard by a human being, and therefore it's bechinas Dishtalshlus. Zoischuk Satayra Asher Tziva Havaya, the second name Havaya, that shows on an Indian as Lamalim Yisrael Dishtalshlus. Who Havaya Shalamalim Dishtalshlus? Shemamshichim Aladei Paraduma. That through the mitzvah of Paraduma, it's Mamshich Madrega that's Lamalim Yisrael Dishtalshlus, and therefore was able to entire Tmeim and was able to cause people who couldn't walk to walk and so on and so forth. It was like a miracle drug. Why? Because it was l'mayla mishtalshlus. Havaya ha'shalamayla mishtalshlus. Mamshichin al day paraduma. The ma'aseh b'chutz dafka. That the whole union of the ma'asim of the korban, this particular korban, is dafka b'chutz. What's the union of chutz? The union of chutz is the union of tshuva. When a person is michutz lamachane, right? And in order to come back into the machane, he has to have the union of tshuva. That Indian of Shal Hashem, Shetzadikim Yavoy Yavoy, there are those that explain that's the Indian of Tshuva. Shu Indian of Tshuva, Latzeis Mihatuma El Hatar Chulu. Well, Tzrichim Ezer, and in order to be able to do this for the average individual to do this, so he has to have help from above. Right? Tzrichim Ezer, Shezeh Al Yadei Lozar, Kael Oizer. Kael Oizer, the Indian from the hamshocha of the Orient of Hasoivev. Shichim Eizer Shizel de Eloza Kel Oizer. Al Deze Mamshichim Michochme Elo because Makor HaChochma Dahainu Gilu Zkinis Asus Orient Sof Habligvu. That's just Nimshach. Asus Orient Sof Habligvu. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Oizer. Okay, that finishes the Maamer. Let's just do the Kitzer. Tzimtzum Hushin is Alam Ora and Sof Nisha Bekinis Hashora. All that remains is Hashora. Again, this is not Hashora of the Kalim, but Hashora, which would be the Rishimo. It's Hashora of the Or, and therefore it's the Esses like Nuza. It's called Hashora. Shein Kenakuda Lagabe Ora and Sof, and it's the Indian of Malchus and the Nakuda Lagabe Ora and Sof. Venetzla Hachochma Shein Nakudas Arishonish Beizgalus. The first thing to be Mizgal is Chochma. Yesh Ba Shnei Tzimtzum. There's two Tzimtzum in the Chochma itself. Siluk Ora and Sof. Removal of the or in sof, miuta or, and the second thing is miuta or. In other words, the siluk of the or is the first, the tzimtzum rishon, and miuta or is the tzimtzum sheni. V'nisha ba roishim or in sof, even after the tzimtzum and the miuta or, nevertheless, there's a roishim of the or in sof that remains in the kalim. We can say that's the or in sof b'chochma, hu levado, hu enzu lasa, zo medragis chochma. As we said from the Haggadah in Perik Lamed Hey in Tanya, And that's what we're talking about over here. The kav is called Gilo Helem and not Yesh Mi'ayin. Legabe, the oiros that come out afterwards, it's Bechinas Gilo Helem. It's nevertheless called Yesh Mi'ayin when we're talking about Legabe or in Sof Shenistalik, the or in Sof that's no longer available. So Legabe that, it's Bechina of Yesh Mi'ayin. V'nisha rak roishim ba'akav, and that Inyan that was Nistalik leaves nevertheless a roishim in the kav, but it's only a roishim. It's not the mechus of the or. Orafize yitznak gam l'shinta zu shakav koisher mechaber mishum roishim ha'en sof shabo. And then we can rely on this Inyan that even according to this shita, the kav is also mechaber and not just moeded medidois. It's mechoider mechaber mekasher rather than just moeded medidois. Mishum roishma ein sof shabo, because of the ein sof in the kav, because of chokhmah. Yeah, you had a question, Aiden? Somebody? No.
The Maim Chaim and the offer are related to those second two oros in etzim. The Giloi and the Shaykh Loilamus Mustama, maybe.
Yeah, probably. He doesn't really. Does he? I don't think he explains it actually. He doesn't.
Because
Really.
the offer comes from Husa Mahus. It says Mahusa.
Yeah, it's Mahus,
and
the
Maim Chaim, the mucker is the mucker for the Chachma, so it's higher.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
It certainly sounds plausible. So that Inyan, so it's explained. Yesh min ayin gab or ensof shenistalik v'nishan rak roishim b'hakav. A roishim of that or ensof remains in the kav. If he's a yitzlak gam l'shita zu shakav koishim b'chav mishum roishim ha'ensof shabo. B'chol anal yu and posuk zois chukas ha'teira. So when we do Chazorah another, several hundred times, you understand how everything shaykh to. Says about Ayin Beis that you never finish learning Ayin Beis. You can finish the say. I've finished the sefer more than once, but every time you learn it, it's another madrega in Biur, another madrega in Yornim, another madrega.
Shkoya.
All right. Good night, everybody. I don't think there's going to be a shiur next Sunday night because of recovering from Purim. But there may be, I don't know. I'll let you know probably either Moisés Shabbos or Sunday morning early. Okay.
All right.
All right. Yes,
Good night. Shkak to you. Laila tov.